In the world of Rolex, things don't just end. They get retired, phased out gracefully. They're given a grand, dignified send-off. But in the quiet early days of 2026, one of the most important watches in history simply vanished. There was no press release from Geneva, no somber announcement from the brand, just a slow, creeping silence online. A watch that had been a constant for 70 years was suddenly a ghost. It started as a whisper on the forums, the kind of rumor you dismiss. Then it became a question between dealers. And finally, a deafening silence from the brand itself. The kind of silence that's louder than any explosion, sending a shockwave through the entire watch world.
It didn't happen with a bang. It happened with the quiet, deliberate click of a mouse, an action replicated in hundreds of offices around the globe. One by one, authorized dealers started erasing it from existence. You could almost watch it happen in real time. CD Peacock in Chicago? Poof, gone. London Jewelers in New York? Gone. Even Bucherer, the massive retail chain owned by Rolex itself, wiped the reference 126710 BLRO from its online catalog. The internal ordering portals, the very systems dealers use to request new stock, just went dark for that model. It was a coordinated, silent, global deletion. An icon gone, leaving this phantom limb where it used to be. I mean, seriously, how does that even happen? For a brand that has built an absolute empire on the very idea of permanence and legacy, this was completely unthinkable. Imagine if Ford just quietly deleted the Mustang from its website one morning. That is the scale of what we are talking about here. And Rolex? Rolex stayed perfectly, almost infuriatingly silent. The only trace left was a single lonely image lingering on their main website, like a digital ghost in the machine. And so the watch world was left with nothing but rampant speculation, a ton of rumors, and one massive unfolding mystery. Okay, so let's treat this like a real investigation. Before we can even begin to figure out why it disappeared, we have to understand what disappeared. And to really get why this matters so much, we need to get to know the victim, because this isn't just any watch. This is a foundational piece of modern watchmaking. Its official title, its birth name, is the Rolex GMT-Master II, reference 126710 BLRO. But to pretty much everyone who loves watches, it's just the Pepsi. It's a 40mm case carved from a block of oyster steel. That's Rolex's own proprietary blend that just has this incredible shine you don't see on other steel watches. On your wrist, it has this perfect heft. It's not heavy, but it's substantial. It feels present. It feels like a genuine tool, built for a real purpose. But the heart and soul of this watch, the thing that makes it a legend, is that unmistakable, vibrant, bicolor red and blue bezel. It's made of ceramic, a material so tough it's basically scratch-proof. And to turn it, oh man, that is one of the great tactile pleasures in the watch world. 24 distinct, perfect clicks as it glides right into place. This watch is one of the 3 pillars of the modern Rolex steel sports lineup, right there alongside the Daytona and the Submariner. To own one is to hold a genuine piece of history on your wrist. And that history, well, it runs deep. The Pepsi isn't some modern fad, it is the original. It was born back in 1954, right in the middle of the golden age of jet travel. Rolex actually developed it for Pan American Airways pilots, these guys who were crisscrossing the globe, flying the new jetliners across multiple time zones. They needed a watch that could track their local time and a reference time, which was Greenwich Mean Time, or GMT. And the solution was pure genius. A fourth hand and a rotating 24-hour bezel. The red half marked the daylight hours, and the blue half was for the night. Simple, perfect. In 1969, the reference 1675 started an incredible 21-year run, cementing its iconic status. Then, when Rolex moved to ceramic bezels, the Pepsi vanished. The technology to make a two-tone red and blue bezel in ceramic just didn't exist. But then in 2014, it made this shocking comeback, but with a huge catch. It was only available on a crazy expensive white gold model. It was Rolex's way of saying, we did it, but this masterpiece is for the elite. Finally, in 2018, the moment every collector had been praying for arrived. The modern steel icon, the 126710 BLRO, was released. And the frenzy, it was unbelievable. You don't have to take my word for it. As Paul O'Teary, the CEO of Pobs Watches, puts it, the Pepsi is just in a category all by itself. It's not just another color option. That red and blue bezel is the design that started it all. It's a cultural touchstone that has been part of our landscape for 7 decades, on the wrists of pilots, astronauts, soldiers, and movie stars. Its absence leaves a hole that no other watch can possibly fill. It is, quite simply, one of the most recognizable designs of the 20th century. Period. So if we're going to treat this like a real disappearance, we need to run a proper investigation. And that means we have to find the clues, we have to establish a motive, and we need to identify the key suspects. To really understand why the Pepsi just vanished off the face of the earth, we have to follow the evidence, wherever it might lead us. And when you lay it all out, a very clear trail starts to form. It begins with the vanishing act itself, that quiet global delisting we saw. Then the trail leads us to this long-rumored fatal flaw, a secret weakness right at the heart of the watch's creation. And finally, it points directly to a successor, a historic rival that's been waiting in the wings for its moment to return. And the great, fascinating irony of this whole story is that the very thing that made the Pepsi an icon was also the thing that doomed it, the color red. For years, this was just dismissed as a collector's rumor, but it turns out to be the central clue to this entire mystery. The motive for the discontinuation wasn't about market trends or a change in taste, it was all about chemistry. The science behind this is absolutely fascinating. See, to create their nearly indestructible ceramic bezels, Rolex uses material called zirconia. It's incredibly stable, it holds pigment really well. For colors like black or that deep blue on the Batman GMT, the process is pretty reliable. But for the color red, zirconia-based ceramic just doesn't work. The pigment is chemically unstable. So Rolex's only solution was to use a completely different, way more difficult material, an alumina-based ceramic. This was the only way to get that deep, stable, vibrant red. But this process was notoriously difficult, with insane failure rates. For every one perfect red and blue bezel that made it out of the factory, many others, marred by tiny imperfections, had to be thrown out. This is the real story behind the legendary supply shortages. It's why people with long purchase histories with their dealers waited years and often never got the call. Rolex simply couldn't make enough of them. The Pepsi was, in a way, a beautiful, flawed creation from the very beginning. And the second the whispers of its demise became credible, the market didn't just react. It absolutely exploded. The disappearance immediately sent a tsunami through the secondary market, which is where the true value of these watches gets decided, every single day. Let's just talk about the numbers for a second, because the premium on this watch has always been staggering. The official retail price was around $11,800, but let's be honest, that was a fantasy number. Almost nobody actually paid retail. For years, on the open market, it consistently traded for about $24,000, more than double its list price. The moment these discontinuation rumors hit, that price didn't just climb, it launched. Asking prices shot up to $26,000, $27,000, and even higher for perfect examples. This wasn't just a small bump, this was a fundamental repricing of a modern icon happening in real time. The speed of this reaction was just breathtaking. In the last month of these rumors alone, the wholesale values, that's what dealers pay each other, jumped by over $1,200. In this market, collectors and dealers do not hesitate. The fear of missing out, combined with the sudden, shocking realization that the supply was being cut off for good, created an absolute perfect storm of demand practically overnight. So this leaves us with the $27,000 question. Where does the price go from here? Right now, there are two competing schools of thought in the market. The first one is that this is just a temporary, hype-driven spike. We all saw that speculative frenzy during the pandemic, and a lot of people got burned when the market corrected. People who believe this theory argue that Rolex made tens of thousands of these watches over 8 years. There's just too much supply out there, and once the initial shock wears off, prices are going to settle back into the low $20,000. But the other theory suggests this is a new permanent plateau, that this isn't like the pandemic bubble. This is a fundamental change in the watch's supply. And if Rolex's replacement model disappoints or just doesn't capture the same magic, then the 126710 BLRO will be remembered as the last and the greatest modern steel Pepsi, cementing its legendary status and pushing prices even higher. Which brings us to the next phase of our investigation. If the Pepsi is truly gone, who or what is poised to take its place? Every great disappearance has a prime suspect, and in this case, it's a watch with a history just as deep and just as storied as the Pepsi's. Enter the Coke, the red and black bezel. For years, it's been the one model that collectors have been begging Rolex to bring back in ceramic. And now, all the evidence suggests its return is not just possible, but imminent. Now, the Coke isn't just some random replacement. It's historically significant in its own right. See, while the Pepsi was the original GMT Master, the Coke was the original GMT Master II. It debuted way back in 1983 on the reference 16760, a thicker model that got the nickname the Fat Lady. It was last seen with an aluminum bezel on the reference 16710 back in the early 2000s. And for over a decade since, the desire for a modern ceramic version has been building to a fever pitch. Then, in 2022, Rolex quietly filed a patent that wouldn't become public for 2 years, but when it did, it revealed their entire plan.
And that patent is the smoking gun. It was published in early 2024, and it's the key that unlocks this whole mystery. It explicitly outlines a process for producing a stable, two-tone ceramic component in red and black. So how did they solve the red problem that plagued the Pepsi? By not using alumina at all. The patent describes using a new material, seriated zirconia. Rolex had invented an entirely new way to make the color red. This is the technological fix for the fatal flaw that doomed the Pepsi. They couldn't perfect the red in alumina, so they invented a whole new way to make it perfectly in zirconia, specifically for a red and black bezel.
So the evidence is all right there. A legendary watch with a fatal production flaw is quietly removed from the market, just as a patent reveals the technological solution that makes its historic rival viable again. The case is pretty much closed. The Pepsi's gone, and the Coke is coming. Which leaves us with one last really crucial question. Which one do you choose? The outgoing legend, the beautiful but flawed icon that defined an entire era, or the returning successor, the technologically superior original with its own deep and compelling heritage? This is really a choice between character and perfection.
And look, this isn't just some philosophical debate. This is a choice with a very real price tag attached. Right now, the market is asking around $27,000 for one of the last steel Pepsis ever made. That's a tangible stake in this decision. Are you betting on the past, or are you betting on the future? Are you putting your money on the flawed masterpiece or the perfect machine?
For me, as much as I respect the history and the incredible technological achievement of the incoming Coke, my choice has to be the Pepsi. There's just something about its 70 years of history, from the dawn of the jet age to its difficult, troubled rebirth in ceramic, that makes it so much more than just a watch. It's a flawed masterpiece. Those production challenges, the supply constraints, the very thing that led to its demise, that's now a crucial part of its legend. It's the last of its kind, a watch that Rolex themselves struggled to make and that collectors struggle to get. The Coke is going to be a fantastic watch. There's no doubt about it. It will be technically perfect, probably more available, a true triumph of engineering. But the Pepsi has a soul. So that is the story of a 70-year-old icon that vanished, not because fashion changed, but because of a fatal flaw hidden within its own beautiful design. It's a story of chemistry, of history, and of market madness that could only happen in the singular, secretive world of Rolex. The Pepsi's disappearance to make way for the technologically superior Coke is one of the biggest strategic moves Rolex has made in years. But it's not the only time they've shocked the market by replacing an icon or introducing something totally unexpected. Just look at the wild story behind the left-handed Sprite GMT. That's a whole other rabbit hole of calculated risks and bold design. So now the choice is yours, the outgoing, legendary Pepsi or the incoming, perfected Coke. Which watch would you choose? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe. New watch stories every week. Watch everything. Tick drop.